So the development, the evolution of modern computers went from vacuum tubes to transistors to microchips or integrated circuits in really not many years, in a couple of decades. And by the 60s, it evolved into microchips, although that took a long time took more time to finally implement. But that's how fast the development of computers in our days has happened, because you're thinking about World War II, which is kind of really the beginnings of the electronic computer, down to which is 1940s, and then you get to the 1960s, and you already have by that time gone from these giant, colossal machines using vacuum tubes and a lot of heat and a lot of electricity, to transistors and to microchips, to where you have computers that are small now. Or well, they get small eventually, but the business computers are still big. But all that happened in the space of 20 years. That's pretty incredible when it comes to the evolution of technology. So then in the 60s, now you start to get people who start to invent programming languages and start to envisage really the modern world of computing. Because previously, programming a computer was kind of difficult, because you didn't have a keyboard. Nobody had a keyboard. You couldn't type into a computer at the beginning. You had to have twist dials, or you had tape input, where you had these long tapes, streams of card, or kind of like hard paper, and you put these holes into the paper that represent the programming you want to put into it, and you feed this into the computer, and that's how you put a program in. So again, we went from that for many years to eventually having keyboards, but that's only in the last 30, 40 years or so that we had keyboards. And so I'm going to take you into the modern era, the one that I've experienced. So you've seen this big evolution from these huge, great beasts using vacuum tubes down to the microchip. And then you've got business computing in the 50s and 60s, where you've got IBM and the other companies like that who are starting to build their business-grade computers. And then so I come into the game in, I'd say about 1980-ish. So I'm 10 years old, and I get exposed to a computer somewhere. I can't remember exactly what was my first exposure to a computer. At school, I think. And somehow I got an interest in it. And I think I was probably about, I'm trying to think back, I think 11 was probably more likely. And they had this computer in school where we were doing some kind of project to type in information. I think it was something to do with one of the census. We were typing in census information, I think that's what it was. We were recording census information. So we're very familiar with that in the church, but way back we were typing in census data into the computer at school, and I think it was that sparked my interest. And here's kind of a really sad tale I want to tell you, really. So I somehow got interested in this idea of computers and programming computers, and I was at my family went on a family vacation to a place called Pontins, and Pontins was this kind of vacation village. We have these vacation villages in England, where you basically they have these huge apartment complexes, or you can camp. And in the village, there's a big swimming pool, and there's a recreational centre, and there's mini golf, and there's club activities, and it's close to the beach, and all these things are kind of incorporated into the vacation village. And I must have been, I think, 12. It was either 12 or 13 when we went on one of these vacations. And on the first day, I discovered that there was a computer club. And like I said, this is brand new. People don't know about computers. Very few people know about programming computers. It's kind of mysterious at this point in time. And I started going to this computer club. And there was a guy there who was teaching people how to program computers in BASIC. And I really got into it. And as it turned out, I spent all of my time in this whole vacation at this computer club learning how to program a computer. It was on a Tandy TRS-80 computer. And I was really excited by this. It was, even though there was swimming and tennis and ping pong and the beach and everything else going on, I was absolutely riveted to this computer club. I loved it. It was the best vacation I ever had. And you know, you have to understand, I'm also an active person. I wasn't just a geek, kind of geeky, nerdy person at school, but I just really liked this. And from that moment onwards, I was hooked on computer programming. And they had a couple of computers at school, but really nothing we could get our hands on. But right about that time, and I'm talking about early 1980s, so what are we going back? We're going back 30 years. So early 1980s, and people started to be able to buy home computers. They were very simple. There was the Sinclair ZX81 that was very popular. It cost something like £150 when it was first new, and it had 1K of memory. And then there was things like the Oric 1, and then there was the Commodore VIC-20, and a variety of a few computers like that that were designed for the home. Now, I wasn't in business at the time, so the idea of the PC or something like that didn't really exist in my world, and I don't think it did yet in business either. That was mid to late 1980s where the PC kind of took off in business. But at home, you had these computers, and their main reason for existence was games. So this was the beginning of the computer games era. Now, just before that, before you had computers, you could type on, that had keyboards you could program, they had the first games consoles. And the first games consoles we were aware of in England was the Atari. And I remember one Christmas time when I guess our friends had had one, and we were all jealous, and it was kind of the big thing at the time. And it was right about the time, this must have been a few years before, so I must have been 8 or 9, I think. And anyway, so me and my brother found an Atari before Christmas. I think it was in my parents' closet. And so we were excited about that, and somehow we asked my parents, oh, we got that for Christmas, and they lied to us. They told us it was for a friend. They were hiding it for a friend, so they couldn't see it. Well, as it turns out, that was our Christmas present that year, and that was so exciting. And my dad, typical for him, wouldn't let us play it for the first day he was playing it. But there were really simple games on this Atari computer, and it was like Tank Pong and the tennis game where you have like a slide this side of the screen, and it has to hit the ball, and it goes back and hits one this side of the screen, and you had joysticks, by the way. None of these I can't do the way you do the Nintendos now. It was joysticks. You held the joystick in your hand, and then you had a button on it to fire. So that's how we used the Atari, and had some really cool games on that. So that was exciting. And then shortly after that is when the home computers started coming in. And I really wanted one. I wanted one so badly, I can't even explain it. It was all I wanted, but no, I couldn't have one. I guess my parents didn't have enough money at the time, and I wasn't very good at saving up money from birthdays and things, so I didn't have one. So what I ended up doing is, any of the people I knew who had like computers in their homes, they became my best friends. There was one kid who had an Oric computer in his house, and I went to his house and I programmed his computer, and I had learned how to program in BASIC, and so I programmed little games and little things for them, and they were all really impressed by that. But I just loved programming computers. In fact, they used to have in like the little electronics stores, they'd have computers that you could play with, before you bought them. Kind of like in GameStop now, where you go and you can kind of play with the Wii or whatever, and you had these stores where these home computers would be on display, but they'd be on, and my parents could take me into town and leave me in one of these stores, and I'd sit there and program the computer for 2 hours, and then they'd come and get me after they'd done their shopping. That's how much I really liked programming computers. And eventually, when I was 14 or 15 in a class before I graduated from high school, I was in a computer studies class, and they had these BBC computers, not to be confused with the BBC on the TV. It was a completely different company, but they were very popular in schools in England, these BBC computers. And I did a class project to create a banking system on this computer. So this is kind of how I liked programming. By this time, some other friends of mine were very clever at programming games with mathematical equations. I wasn't like that. I was kind of into the business application of computers. So I knew what I wanted to do for a career. I wanted to be a computer programmer, and then a systems analyst, and then a project manager. I had it all planned out. And so I went to technical college and learned programming in COBOL and in Pascal and in some other languages. And then I started my first computer job. And when I first started my first computer job, so I was 18 at the time when I finished my 2 years technical college in computer programming, and I was programming now on IBM AS400 computers. and these were mini computers, what they call them mini computers. There was a difference between mainframe computers, which were the huge, gigantic computers, mini computers, which were business grade, big computers, but not, you didn't have to have a whole entire house for them, and then you had personal computers, or PCs, or the microcomputers they called them. And those were kind of the three big distinctions. But in most business applications, things were not done on PCs, they were done on mini or mainframe computers. So I did all my programming work on these mini computers, these IBM System 36 and AS400. And even in those days, they were loading data onto the computers and saving it with these big reels of tapes. So that's the business side of it, and now let me go back to the home side of it. On the home side of it, when you had these little computers like the... oh, that's right, I finally got to, when I was, I guess I was 15 or 16, and I finally got my own home computer. I was 16. What happened is my brother, my parents had divorced, we were living in a different side of the country. My dad had bought a motorcycle for my older brother on his 16th birthday, and it came to me on my 16th birthday. But my mother didn't want me to have it, so a little while later I swapped it with a friend for his Amstrad CPC 464 computer. So I finally got my home computer, and I just spent all the time at home programming it and doing things, and had a lot of fun. Now, here's the kind of fun things to think about. So in those days, there was no hard drive on a computer. It had memory, had 1K or 16K of memory or something like that, but you had to save your programs off onto a cassette. You remember cassettes, they were the forerunner before CDs, you probably don't see them very often these days, but a cassette. And so you'd have a cassette recorder, and it would be connected to the home computer, and if you wanted to save your program, then you had to click save, and it would record it to the cassette using sound. It would you know, think back to what I said earlier about zeros and ones being on and off. Well, you can do that with sound, and you have this whole music of zeros and ones in sound format, and it sounded like a fax machine. That's, if you've heard a fax machine, that's what it's doing. It's sending out information in audio format, representing zeros and ones in a long stream of information. That's why it sounds like because it's going from zeros to ones, and there might be 3 zeros and then a 1, then a 0, then a 1, then 3 ones, and you know that's why it sounds like that. So that's what it used to sound like when we were recording our programs to a cassette. And then when we wanted to load them back into the computer, or if you bought a computer game, it would be on a cassette. And this cassette you put into the cassette player and you'd load it, and it might take 20 minutes to load your game as it is loading this sound. It's playing this sound and loading into your memory, and then once it's loaded, you can play your game, or it's brought back your program.